Welcome back to Trust Your Eyes. Round 15 might be looked back upon as a round of separation. There were big winners and big losers in a defining 6 games of football. But we have to start in Adelaide, not with the Crows but Power, who suffered a third straight loss in a 79-point humiliation at the hands of Brisbane. Ken Hinkley was shown on the big screen throughout the afternoon and was repeatedly booed heavily. So what is the biggest fallout from this game? Well, clearly the biggest fallout from this game is that Ken Hinkley is once again fighting for his coaching career at Port Adelaide. He's in year 12. This is pretty much, the last run that a lot of coaches have after their 10th season. You don't last much longer. It's just the reality. Now, I think he was gone after next year anyway, because Josh Carr's waiting in the wings, who's in charge in the midfield, but things can change very quickly. And because of their run of form, the last 3 weeks against 3 good sides they've lost, it might be coming sooner than expected. So for those Port fans wanting Hinkley out, I think he would have been out by the end of next season, but it might be coming very soon. I think it's really changed since the 2021 prelim. They had a fantastic home and away season, got to that home preliminary final against the Western Bulldogs and got humiliated. They were never in the game. It was a huge loss, especially at the time. 2022, they struggled. Last year, they went out in straight sets after going on that 13-game win streak. And now, after an 80-point loss to Brisbane, you can see the trend here. In those big games against the big teams, Ken Hinkley and his squad just haven't done enough. So if they don't make top 8 from this point and probably win a final, it could be coming to an end for Ken Hinkley a year quicker than I think most would expect. We backtrack to Friday night. Carlton, from the first bounce, were a class above Geelong and sit 2 points ahead of Essendon in second. Most believe the Blues are the second best team right now, so what can the Cats do to try and revive a fading season? Well, it seems right now not much can really be done. There could be a silver lining in the sad news of Tom Hawkins' foot injury, which is still at the time of recording this quite a bit of a mystery. It seems like he's going to miss a significant amount of time and maybe his career will be all done, which would be a sad way to go out for a Geelong Football Club legend and an AFL great in his time in the competition. But it might give them a shot to bringing in a young guy like Shannon Neal, or maybe go really small in the forward line to try to get a bit more pace. It's just a possibility at this time. But they got problems in their defence. When we think of Geelong under Chris Scott, I know I do, I think of just a solid defence with Stewart, Henry, Guthrie, all these guys are very, Kolajasny, all these guys, really good defenders. But since round 9, they are the worst defence per inside 50. No one in the competition, not Richmond, North Melbourne or West Coast in this period of time, have allowed easier shots on goal and goals from their inside 50s. The midfield's light on, Dangerfield suspended, may or may not get off, and Cam Guthrie is still waiting in the wings. So it doesn't look like the midfield will be getting any stronger anytime soon. And now the forward line without Hawkins as a hole to fill. So I can't see where Chris Scott goes to try and revive this season. He's a master coach. He'll probably come up with a plan, but whether it's good enough, we'll wait and see. The Sydney Swans blitzed the Giants in a 10-goal run either side of halftime to break the game open. They have 1 loss in the season and are scoring in so many different ways. So what should their strategy be for the last 9 weeks? Well, Sydney have Fremantle at home this week, St Kilda away, and then North Melbourne at home once again. So if they can get 3 wins there, they're in a real good position. They'll obviously still be first. Now, their last 6 weeks is relatively challenging, but at that point, if they can win these next 3, they only have to win probably 2 or 3 of the last 6, to get a top spot on the ladder. And even if they lose 4 of those 6, they'll definitely be in second. So it sets them up to do what Geelong did in 2022, and that's to rest and reset some of their guys who have had fantastic seasons. You got to use this to your advantage. You've banked all these wins. Heaney, Warner, Grundy and Goulden are all playing pretty high time on ground in the high 80s, low 90s at the moment. So you got to get some rest into those guys and get them really fresh for the last month of the season. And then you can get in Luke Parker and Callum Mills, who from the outside we think are 2 important players, but you never know. So you got to try and figure out where they fit into the puzzle. And a lot of the teams are banged up right now in all facets of the competition and every place on the ladder. So I think this last 9 weeks, if they can get their 5 or 6 wins as quick as possible, then Sydney should really use this to their advantage and get as fresh as possible for the last month of the season. Essendon got a much needed win against the valiant West Coast side. The 30-point margin didn't show how tight the game really was. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how important a win was this for the Bombers? This was a 10 out of 10 on the importance scale. For their top 4 aspirations, Essendon simply had to win this, especially with the game being at home against the side in West Coast who they have had struggles against in recent times. In hindsight, I actually thought this was a pretty good performance from Essendon. At the time watching it, I thought they were a bit flaky, gave the ball away, but if you go side by side with experience, really West Coast were just missing Tim Kelly and then Harley Reid, who's obviously a first-year player. Well, the Bombers, Darcy Parish is still out from that midfield, Jade Gresham was out in the forward line, and Todd Goldstein was managed. So that's 3 pretty experienced players. And again, I know West Coast have a lot of kids, but they also have a lot of guys who have played 200 plus games and are still very good players. Thought Essendon's transition game was really good. They pretty much scored all their points from the defensive 50, but that also left them vulnerable at stages, and West Coast took advantage. So getting that balance right, I think, will be important. So if they can get some of their soldiers who have been missing back in, and they can beat Geelong next week, I see no reason why they aren't firm favourites for a 3rd or 4th place position at the end of the home and away season. In the logjam of 4th to 13th, Fremantle got a big home win against Gold Coast in a classic 8-point game, while Melbourne held off North Melbourne to stay within touch of the top 8. Which of the 2 wins was more impressive? To me, it was clearly Fremantle, and I'll give a few reasons why. I think last week was an aberration because they were back to their ball hunting best. The pressure was high against Gold Coast, who I know their midfield drops away from home, but they're still pretty formidable. The midfielders kicked goals, Young kicked 3, Sarong and Brayshaw also hit the scoreboard, which was a big positive, and the defence was also back in order for a majority of the game. So Fremantle, I still think, are a top 4 shot, win all their home games, win 2 or 3 on the road, and they give themselves a chance to at worst host a home final. But on the flip side was Melbourne, who got a much needed win, but when we look at it deeper, it really wasn't that impressive of a win. It was just a much needed one. I don't think they gained a whole lot of confidence from it. Looking at Simon Goodwin's press conference post-game, didn't look overly excited, and I think he knows that there are weak points in this side. The forward line didn't function great. They didn't score in the last quarter. Clayton Oliver's a shade of himself, and to cap it off, that last quarter fade-out was disturbing. They looked really slow. They looked unfit. North Melbourne were running all over them. So I can't see Melbourne making the top 8 at this stage, and I don't think this win was very impressive. It was just important to keep their season alive. From all the sides sitting 4th to 13th, which 3 are under the most pressure from this point onwards? I don't think number 1 will surprise anyone. It has to be Port Adelaide. I think they had ambitions to win the premiership this season, and if they don't make the top 8, there'll be changes. Now, number 2 is the Brisbane Lions. Now, this was a team coming into the season that I think most people would have expected to be top 4 at worst, and more than likely top 2. But right now, they are still outside the top 8. Now, I know they're in really good form and they're getting Will Ashcroft back, but nothing is guaranteed. And you would have thought anything less than a grand final appearance before the season started would have been a failure. So I think there's still a lot of pressure left on this Brisbane side, although they are flying from a very slow start. And third is not the Western Bulldogs or Hawthorn or Gold Coast, but the GWS Giants. This was a team that were the premiership favourites in the first few weeks of the season, and things have slowly fallen away across the board, especially in the forward half with their offence. They can't get any run and carry going consistently, and Toby Green, their captain, has definitely dropped well off the form he was in 2023. So right now they're looking at a bottom half of the 8 finish, which I don't think is what a lot of people would have expected, especially after their first month of football. Looking forward to next week, pick the 3 games which are a must-win for sides in the top 8 and top 4 hunt. Well, the Bulldogs have to beat North Melbourne on Saturday to keep their top 8 chances are live. They have a very difficult draw from this point onwards. I think equal first with Melbourne. They'll get some soldiers back in Darcy, Norton, possibly James Harmes, which should help them out. Next up is the Gold Coast Suns in their biggest game of the season at home against Collingwood. They can't win away from home, so it means they have to win every home game, and this one against the reigning premiers is no exception. And the last must-win game is for Geelong against Essendon. We know Essendon want to finish top 4, so it's these type of sides that Geelong need to beat. Their percentage isn't great right now. They're out of form. They've lost Tom Hawkins. So if they have any shot of finishing in that top 8, then they have to beat Essendon this week. Thanks for listening to Trust Your Eyes for round 15. I hope you all enjoyed, and good luck to all your teams for round 16.